Hi friends, welcome back to 5 Minute Modern, where in 5 minutes or less we learn about an important artist, artwork, or concept in the history of modern art. My name is Cindy, and today we're looking at the powerful and heartbreaking work of Käthe Kollwitz, whose bold stands against war and fascism made her one of the most important artists of the 20th century. Born in 1867 in Prussia, Kollwitz was a lifelong democratic socialist who often showcased the hardships faced by the poor and marginalized in her work. Her early print cycles, that is, a linked series of artistic prints, addressed uprisings of working-class people throughout Germany's history. However, in 1914, she would suffer an immense tragedy that would alter her life and art forever. As World War I broke out, Kollwitz's 18-year-old son Peter desperately wanted to enlist, but he needed his parents' permission. Kollwitz consented, and Peter was killed in action only 10 days after departing for the front. Kollwitz was devastated by the loss of her son and felt immense guilt over allowing him to enlist. Leaving behind the gritty portrayals of war from her earlier print cycles on working-class uprisings, Kollwitz became a staunch pacifist, a change that was reflected in her art. The immense destruction wrought by World War I was a common subject in the German art of the late teens and 20s. Artist Otto Dix was deeply scarred by his experiences as the commander of a machine gun unit in the trenches, and he used the horrific violence he had seen on the battlefield to inform his 1924 print cycle, The War. This series of 50 etchings features rotted corpses, disfigured soldiers, and nightmarish portrayals of troop advances. But Kollwitz would chart her own unique path in her condemnation of the suffering brought on by war. Always deeply attuned to the experiences of women and children, Kollwitz chose to focus on their experience of the war with stark portrayals of families haunted by the loss of loved ones on the battlefield. Filmmaker Francois Truffaut would famously remark that there was no such thing as an anti-war film, implying that in showing the machinery of war, films inevitably glorify rather than condemn combat. Although Kollwitz was a visual artist, not a filmmaker, I would argue that her work is purely anti-war, choosing to eschew any portrayal at all of the battlefield in favor of giving voice to the mourning of those left behind when the men go off to fight. Perhaps her most poignant works on the cost of war can be seen in her stark self-portraits. Many expressionist artists in Germany at the time sought to show their inner angst in the harsh angles or bold colors of their work. But Kollwitz's prints and drawings remain sharply realistic. She shows us the immensity of her pain over the loss of her son, not in any stylistic affectations, but rather in the faithful rendering of the exhaustion in a face increasingly aged by grief. Her weariness and grief became all the more tangible in the 1930s as another nationalistic government rose in Germany. Kollwitz opposed the Nazi regime from the very start, signing an appeal for Germany's left-wing parties to unify against Hitler in 1933. Consequently, she was forced out of her position as the first woman in the Prussian Academy of Arts, and her work was removed from museums throughout Germany. In 1937, she would be included in the Nazis' infamous exhibit of so-called degenerate art opposed by the authoritarian regime. But even as her work was censored and criticized in Germany, she became increasingly popular abroad as a symbol of anti-fascism. Sadly, she died in 1945, just a few weeks before the Nazis surrendered. I think her body of work has lost none of its intensity in the succeeding years. Although it can be difficult to look at, every time I see a work by Kollwitz, I am reminded of the importance of peace and of empathy for our fellow human beings. And that's a message from which we can all benefit. Thanks so much for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.